how does that sound to others? Something that might be some willingness to participate in? Yeah, it's such a teachable book, I think, because it is, the style is so almost conversational. And yeah, it's funny. There's a flippancy to it that David, irreverence that David had that I really love. Yeah, I'd love to hear if what ideas all of you have about what you see this reading group being, because of course, we can go through the text thoroughly. We can link this to events going on today. There's so many directions that we can go, and as a collective, that of course is something that we're wanting to keep in mind. I see Nika's shared a Google Doc.
May I?
Yeah, Simona.
Hi. Well, I see it as a joining forces. David was so multifaceted, and I read him as a philosopher because the connections of ideas I find in his texts is extraordinary. But I'm not. I have no preparation, no background in economics, so it's difficult for me to judge whether he's saying dumb stuff or if it's right. And I have zero background, one background in anthropology. This is the same. What we can do is to read the book from our different points of view. For example, what is extraordinary for me in these chapters is what he says about Nietzsche, and what he says about what happens to our ethics when we start thinking of it in terms of debt, which is, as a quote, it's page 13 in the first chapter on the experience of moral confusion. The moment one asks the question, who really owes what to whom, one has begun to adopt the creditor's language. What precisely does it mean to say that our sense of morality and justice is reduced to the language of a business deal? What does it mean when we reduce moral obligations to debts? What changes when the one turns into the other? And how do we speak about them when our language has been so shaped by the market? On one level, the difference between an obligation and a debt is simple and obvious. A debt is the obligation to pay a certain sum of money. As a result, a debt, unlike any other form of obligation, can be precisely quantified. This allows debts to become simple, cold, and impersonal, which in turn allows them to be transferable. If one owes a favor on one's life or one's life to another human being, it is owed to that person specifically. But if one owes $40,000 to 12% interest, it doesn't really matter who the creditor is. Neither does either of the two parties have to think much about what the other party needs, wants, is capable of doing, as they certainly would if what was owed was a favor or respect or gratitude. One does not need to calculate the human effects. This is the ethical point of the book, And yes, I repeat, this is a great book on ethics for me, and on politics, and on economics, and on human relationships. So yes, just let's join forces and see it from our different points of view.
I think,
Hello, Sid.
yes, I think I think Ida also, I think, is there an icon? I think there's a button somewhere where you can digitally raise your hand. I can't find it, but yes, I wanted to follow up on what Simona was saying. I don't remember exactly where the quote was, but it was along those lines where he mentioned the difference between loaning something to someone you know versus to a stranger. That if I owe a debt or have anything, if I lend someone a pair of shoes and it's to my neighbor or to someone, it's different than when it's to a stranger. And I think this is this was for me a very insightful quote in the first two chapters that I read, because it adds what you were saying, Simona. It adds this, I wouldn't say ethical, I'm not a philosopher, I wouldn't use that term, but for me it adds the human element in general. It adds humanity to what otherwise is a transaction. And I think this is what he gets to throughout the book as well, from what I have read, that even if it is a transaction, yeah, I think this transaction versus human element was, to me, something important to raise.
Is it pronounced Ida?
It's Ida, but yeah, that's
Ida, okay.
but that's fine as well. Yeah, I can't
Ida.
find the raising the hand thing either. But anyway, yeah, I think I also paid attention to the same quote in the book that Simona mentioned, because I think like it kind of highlights how the book starts from the point where he's speaking to that woman, and then she's saying that, oh, surely one has to pay their debts, and that's kind of like the starting point. And and then he's kind of combining these different elements like economics and morality, but then kind of showing that it's more about morality, even though we kind of perceive it to be something about economics. And I also quite like the fact that how at least the first two chapters makes you question the idea of what is economics. And I'm someone who studied politics, philosophy, and economics, and we had quite a lot of like interdisciplinary modules, and I think that kind of makes me think of that, how I've studied a lot of things in university, how that kind of questioned economics as this very narrow topic, and how he's kind of making us understand that what we think the economy is, it's actually something much more broader and cultural. And I think that's why I'm also very intrigued in this book, because it is very interdisciplinary in that sense, and kind of questions like it's like orthodox economics and the orthodox idea of what economics is, I think.
Tom, would you like to talk?
Well, I used to teach economics in night school, and I began every course defining what economics was. I used the normal definition of that, and I always thought that somehow that felt very strange. Students accepted it, but I had more problems with that. And rereading this book, I have the same thing. I wouldn't explain it again like this as I used to do. But what I wanted to say, why I raised my hand, is I find this language very confusing. I used to train accountants as well, and I've found it always very difficult to explain to them what a debt is, what a credit is. We always had to go back to fixed schemes just to find out who owned who, etc., etc. Is that just an impression, or am I the only one who has this, always has to think about what happens?
Mehdi, would you like to?
Steven, and I think this actually is already is an interesting discussion, like the page and paragraph mentioned by Simona and also I think Ida, that I was not really paying that much attention to that part, I must say, when I was reading. It's like other parts my first reading was other parts that I was more focusing on. Specifically, the way I was reading the book is that I was looking at as the history of money and how that actually developed. So, and what's the relationship between that history of money and the current, like socio-political, like capitalism and whatever we want to say. So, but this actually shows the richness of this book, as that it can be like studied in many ways, and it will offer many things to different people. That's richness is there. I think I like to about the quotation that you mentioned, Steven. I liked one, the starting of the book, which like in the end last paragraph of the first chapter. In my book, it's page 19 is the book, and it's really, I think David wanted to achieve something great, and he achieved it actually in this book and also in the Dawn of Everything. And that is for a very long time. I will, and the intellectual consensus has been that we can no longer ask great questions. Interestingly, it looks like we have no other choice. So that he actually asked a great question, and he managed to kind of answer that, and not just in this book, in other books. So I think it's a tremendous achievement from that. But this book has many dimensions, and I definitely missed some, but I would like to hear from other people what they have actually found in this book. That's it from me.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah, so just following up on what a couple of the other people said, I just what I suppose what Mehdi says, ask great questions. It sounds like a bit of a curse these days that we're forced into considering great questions. What is the value of how the world is organized that is facing economic collapse as well as a climate collapse? But the other thing I noticed that too, where he says at the beginning of chapter 2, a history of debt then is thus necessarily a history of money. The easiest way to understand that role that debt has played in human society is simply to follow the forms of money has taken. So I wanted to tie this back to something that Tom had said about the confusion of sort of definitions and words here. So I presume that's a statement. This is my method. I'm calling I'm looking at the forms that money has taken, so I can say that's what debt is. But it does seem a bit confusing, even though he speaks in a very casual way, very common sense, and kind of brings out some punchy points. The first chapter is as Nika noticed, is witty. It's almost stand-up comedy to say this particular story. And he starts like words like obligation and debt. He tries to differentiate them. What's the difference? And the debt is quantified. But what's the difference between credit and money? But money, he kind of makes a difference between money as a generic thing and coinage. When he talks about quantified, he talks about mathematics is used to quantify it. But he also makes a sort of distinction between violence in a proper sense, or one would normally think there's a distinction between violence and mathematics, but he definitely looks at, like, is there some kind of hidden need to quantify things through mathematics with violence? So I'm quite interested in looking at all the subtleties between how he uses the same word, maybe in a different way, in different contexts. And I agree with people, it's deceptively simple, much of this, I think.
Hello, Jenny.
Hi, sorry to not have my video. I am driving to meet a caregiver for my dad, and it means no video. But I'm very much watching. So one of the things, so I'm in the field of anthropology, and I think that part of that nuance that David does so well in all of his books is he really zooms in and gets into this minutia of weeds, and you almost get lost in this minutia of terms and following, but then he zooms back out and allows you to place that within larger context. And I think that anthropologically, that is such a distinct thing that he does in his writing that I don't see in others, where you get brought into the construct of money, the construct of a flesh debt or a blood debt or a monetary debt, and then he'll step back. And I think part of that is to destabilize the ethnocentrism that can happen with money and debt, and thinking of it in a very narrow construct, but really forcing us to step outside of a Western construct. And I think he does that very early in the book, and it gets even more nuanced as it goes farther.
Thank you for that. Let's see. I don't see any other hands up. Sid, yes.
I think two things. First of all, the essence, I think, of the beginning is really to debunk this myth. I think it's so obvious that that's really what the beginning of the book is. First of all, this strange encounter that took place in London is obviously something unforgettable. But there's really the essence to me is that debunking the myth of the origins of money. As someone who's a trained economist, or I'm not employed as an economist, but I did my bachelor's degree in it. When he basically debunks this myth that remains to this day, that barter was the origin of money, and he gives all these examples of very well-known economists, potentially also Nobel laureates, who are saying, imagine you're in a village, and then the carpenter wants to trade with the butcher and all that stuff. I've heard that over and over again, and I think he really debunks it, and it still continues to be a myth, and no one questions it. That's the one thing. Then I hate to bring up TikTok, but there is a TikTok video that is making the rounds, which I think I would just like to quickly read it. The title is something around money has different names, and I just want to quickly go through the list. It's remarkable how nicely it fits in with the whole dialogue. Though I hate TikTok and all these short videos. It says, in marriage it's called dowry. In a temple, church, it's called a donation. In school it's a fee. In divorce, it's alimony. In courts, it's a fine. To kidnappers, it's ransom. To children, it's allowance. When you pay the government, it's taxes. When you borrow from a bank, it's a loan. Employer to workers, it's salary. When you owe someone, it's debt. That's just the only time reference of debt. And master to subordinates, it's wage. Huh? Isn't it something? I think it just made me laugh because it just fit in very nicely with the whole book, which emphasizes only on debt or particularly. But I think, yeah, just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you. That was wonderful. I see there's a hand up from a telephone. I see only numbers, so happy to hear from you.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, cool. Okay. Hi. Yeah, my name is Sevan. I thought that my experience was more similar to like kind of Nika's in that it's kind of jokes and kind of humorous stories, but then like it kind of in funny points, but then it kind of builds up to kind of something quite serious. So like on like page 2 of my book, he's describing like the IMF as like a high finance equivalent of guys who come to break your legs. And I just had this like mental picture of like kind of Christine Lagarde with like maybe like an Yves Saint Laurent hammer turning up to a meeting or something like that. But then, you know, 2 pages on, he's talking about basically how people have used debt to justify violence. And it just made me think of things like kind of like what happened recently with like Afghanistan, where their money was taken from the United States. And the first two chapters was basically that, of like kind of flipping between things that I found really hilarious to things that were kind of quite profound. And from my notes, like the last thing was, you know, like notice as in like so many examples, we have a tendency to slip from imagining savages to small town shopkeepers.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello, Steven. I'm in Hamburg. I want to introduce myself again. I'm the director of the Network for Monetary Diversity. So I'm very interested in this book, in the content, in the history of money. But as we are starting this reading group, I would like to add, I am very much interested in the people who are here as well, because unfortunately I never had a chance to come to know David Graeber. And I would like, for example, to ask you, Steven, and Nika as well, how was this process of making this book, writing this book? Because it must have been really a very much of an effort. And it takes so much motivation to get through such a very demanding subject as debt. In German, for example, the word debt is the same word for guilt or Fort. It's Schuld. In German, you have Schuld and Schulden. It's one word for debt and guilt. And it's a very heavy moral topic as well. And sort of, I would be interested in the making of the book, the story behind the book, and if you already knew David Graeber when he was writing that book, that would be very interesting for me to get to know something about that process as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Nika.
Yeah, I can answer this question, but I first want to reply. I forgot the name of the person on the phone who was talking about Afghanistan and the debts.
Yeah, that was me. Sorry, Nika. My name is Sevan. My call dropped.
Yeah.
So I had to call back in.
Yeah, Sevan, you said,
Yes.
yeah? Yeah, so I also agree with Sevan, and I disagree with Simona that you should be economist to understand the, what's going on in this book. I think this first chapter is deliberately make fun in a quite cruel way of all these people who pretended to be, so knowledgeable, but it's like how David formulated it, just simply turn out to be a fraud. That's it. And despite the fact that, yes, it's confusing and it's all complicated concept, but maybe partially they are complicated because it's a whole bunch of professionals who is actually making it very complicated. And it's a whole industry of people, you know, with all the special languages that is confusing everyone. And exactly because of that, I think David become so popular, despite the fact that it was extremely difficult of him. Yes, I knew David when he was writing this book. He was sending me chapter by chapter in a Word file. And then by the time he's supposed to be published that, he was really started to whine in Skype at that time, because publishing house was kind of, you know, the editor would disappear, it was take forever, and you know, and he was really angry in a way and like sad that he cannot publish that. And I was like, at the end, I was kind of tired of him whining, and I was like, but you know, why do you, like, you sounds like some kind of fofa who like just want to be like, why do you want to do that? And he was like, because I feel I need to participate in a public debate, because I think what I'm saying is like very, very clear and it will change many people's minds. And it's indeed, it happens. It's just really magic. And also like David, yeah, he just, it's such a big book, and he just, he's supposed to have an institute behind you, checking everything, you know, all these references and so on. It didn't have anything. He was just one person doing all the job. And he definitely, he was like super, how call it, capable of working endless amount of hours. But I think one day it will be really great to republish the debt. Like making all the references, like put together some kind of group who will go through the text very thoroughly and do all this amazing job that actually was done for Dawn of Everything, and that David didn't have resources to do for that because he was kind of young unknown author. You know, he just, it's like he got an advance payment of, I don't know, $1,500 for the book, you know, so. And he has a job and he was making money, and this book, 500 pages, was written in his spare time. So that's how he wrote it.
That is very interesting. Thank you.
So just one question actually related to the previous question by Catherine to Nika is that how long it took for David to write this book, and like every day on average, how many hours you spend? This is I'm a bit curious actually about this. So because it's a big book with a lot of analysis, lot of synthesis of things. So how was that possible? It looks like an impossible task.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it's David was, he was saying his secret is always work in between. So he has this very thin, small computer. He was writing all the time in the bath when he was sitting in the restaurant, you know, and he was, you know, he was an activist who he also was, likes to be with people. So he would love to go out and to demonstration, to everywhere. So he would just write in a taxi, in a subway, you know, sitting on, like, yeah, he was just living like that. I have a friend musician in Berlin. So this guy is just constantly playing, just, you know, that's how he perceived the world. It wasn't a work for him.
So thank you, Nick.
Yeah, and there were also some interviews that he gave when the book came out where he was asked questions about how he did it. And there are some funny interviews where he gives specifics about being at a particular demonstration, a protest, where in between actions, he was scribbling notes for this book. So he, you know, he somehow had a way of doing that. I, you know, clearly some people have gifts that are supernatural, and I'm not sure how we can explain them. But, you know, we're blessed with those gifts while we have them. Tom, would you like to say something? You're on mute, Tom.
When I was teaching economics, I always made the joke that the only thing economists never speak about is about money. They have this funny concept that's very simple. you have barter and then something that is a veil, and that's about it. But rereading the first chapters now, I realized what struck me the first time was how much violence was actually mentioned, which for an economist at the time wasn't clear at all. It looked very clean, almost abstract, but I didn't really look into this, but I think almost every page of the first chapters refers to some kind of violence. You have these triangles, debtors, creditors, and enforcers, etc. And that made me doubt a lot of what I had studied in the past. And that's the reason why I think I kept on reading about debt. And I know Nika knows him, and I think most of you do. That's how I ended up with Steve Keen, who actually talks about all the effects of all the debts that people collect, etc., etc.
Hello, Bruno.
Hi, I want to come back to what Tom said and also what Nika put in the chat about the international debt relationships, and then link it to the violence that Tom indicated. I have a background in law, and what I took from law was mainly that you can make a system very abstract. I think in the book, Graeber speaks of if you turn something into mathematics, it's very easy to insert the violence. And I think that's quite interesting. What put me on this track was this book, seeing that like if you put something in mathematics, you can insert a violence, but the legal system as a whole is an exertion of violence. There's discussion and jurisprudence about how exactly and what violence, but in essence, it's the violence question and the international relationship to that. If you read on Madagascar, that the French actually call it something like moralizing that or something text, that they don't really hide it in saying, well, this is a text for your own good or for social security. You know, they call it directly like this is the debt to integrate you in our system. And that I find very interesting, that like he found examples, and there are a couple of those that he says, well, the name that they give to the text is quite obviously what the violence is what the violence name is as well. So that I find very interesting, that like the link between the system being mathematical and thus more easy to extract, and what they call the mathematical system, that it's not always that opaque. So that I find very interesting in the book.
Thank you. Yeah, John.
Hello. I was also thinking through a thread about mathematization. Is that how you pronounce that? And I was connecting it to a thread from the dawn of everything, and just thinking about like over history, like how math has just started saturating the way that we think about the world and social relationships. Like in the dawn of everything, I remember there was a discussion about how there were two concepts of equality. One was like two people were like equal to each other because of they have some certain qualities that are important. And another version of equality was that people were just so different that there was no way to actually compare them. So they were just completely unique. And then I feel like through the beginning of this book, it's like things start becoming more, we start like using that like mathematical operations, like this person is equal to that person, and then this person has done this, and what have they done? Can we quantify what they've done, and when are they going to give back to someone else? And that's those like sort of operations seem so simple. So maybe that's why it's just become so widespread in the world, where money now, nobody really knows what it is, but if you tell someone like, this person owes this or this person owes that, nobody really understands where the money comes from, like what a dollar actually refers to, or at least I don't. And it just feels like it's gone wild. So yeah, this is just one thread I think has been interesting. I'm really curious about how that develops.
Hello, Kenneth.
Hi, hello everyone. I just wanted to pick up on the thread that John had put down, as well as the threads in the chat from Nika and from myself as well, actually, because I had the exact same question as Nika had just posted, like what has changed since after the 2008-2009 crisis, because we are presently in a situation where the IMF is again ascended, in the sense that I believe in the past year, the IMF had, the value of its emergency loans had reached a record level over the past year, partly as a consequence of the pandemic, and a lot of countries had defaulted to asking for help from the IMF, from the goons, basically, to bail them out of their fiscal situations, right? And what's interesting to me about the book overall is that it shows us that economics is only one story amongst other possible stories about value and how value is made and created and exchanged by human beings, and that debt is only one moral system amongst other possible moral systems. And if we can imagine a world of debt, we can certainly imagine a world where there isn't debt. Like moral systems would be something else, right? And this is an extraordinary insight, but personally, as someone who would participate in conversations about debt, I have a lot of difficulty translating this into something that breaks the common sense within any given conversation, right? And any given conversation right now, when we talk about the past 1 or 2 years, defaults into conversations about interest rates, about inflation, about the recession that is forecast to happen next year. I.e., I personally, even though I reject economics as a way of understanding the world, I still default to economics as a language for making sense of this world. And I'd like to break away from that, one interesting thing I think that we should be paying attention to is that in many ways, we are seeing a collapse of this common sense, right? Lots of people have cottoned on to the fact that the IMF is basically it's a violent mechanism. Lots of people have cottoned on to the fact that U.S. Treasuries, the dollar, is basically, it's a piece of paper, right? But the way this common sense is collapsing, it leaves a lot to be desired. For some people, they take this as a premise for going for another form of money, Bitcoin, right? Like U.S. dollar is a fiat it's a fiat currency. Let's go for something that no government has control over. Let's go for Bitcoin. Or you have other people who take this as the departure point for saying that we should reject the IMF entirely. We should try and arrive at a new international financial system that is not in the hands of the US, or one which is centered on China. So we essentially kill abacus to replace it with another abacus, is how a lot of these people have taken this insight. So what I'm personally curious with, or what I personally like to understand is how could I reframe these conversations and these discussions in terms of what we've learned from this book, or what we can learn from this book, and what we've perhaps learned from other reading in our own travels. And I'm speaking as someone who's come from the third world and who's lived through a debt crisis or two. Okay, I'll stop there.
Hello, Nika.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial question now, because so I believe this war that we see now is partly about Kenneth's question, because it's not only replacing with China, but it's basically the BRICS who combined have more people living than dollar market. They're creating the same structures as same international bureaucratic structures that's already in place. So they have their own IMF, their own World Bank, they own everything, and then this system is clashing now with each other, and that is about this. I think it's about the different way of arranging social relationship, not through this institution or through this understanding of what is money as it manifested by IMF or whatever name, I don't know, institutions that the BRICS country are putting together. So, and I regarding the cryptocurrency, I think it's pretty clear now how much they how Kit Hart very well put it together. This is an illusion of the apolitical money. They're talking about money, cryptocurrency, as the apolitical. It's all created by technology people who is also extremely free marketer, most of them. So this is, to my understanding, there's no way that it will be able to provide this third way to go or alternative. Is just a technology that will be hijacked or used by one or another party, and that's what's going on now with it.
Hey, Michael.
You just so maybe making this distinction between that we have a world where different people have relationships. Oh, is this person important? Did this person loan something or borrow something? Did this person help that person out? Was this person threatening that person? Right? All these interpersonal relationships where there's sort of politics. And then you have a world where you can just put money in and you count it. Like an economist seems to have like like a sort of autistic view of the universe and people. That's not an appropriate use of the word autistic. It's a metaphorical use. Obviously, autism has lots of people who do have clear relationships, but that in the sort of common use of that word as a lack of emotion, which is not exactly what actual people who have autism have. But like, so my question is for people, and I'm not. It's not rhetorical. I'm not. What do you think that myth of barter covers up? So I'd love to hear what people's, just to look at the second text. Like, okay, it's clear that the myth of barter was wrong in the way that David made the argument, but what exactly does it cover up? Why do money theorists and economists need that to start their story?
Anyone's welcome to chime in. I know I have thoughts, but I'm going to defer. How about Mehdi?
I can come in. It's like I'm seeing a lot of talks about economics, and I'm an economist. I teach economics, and I think it's one of the most brilliant subjects. Okay, and absolutely an amazing thing. And I would think that David himself was an economist by reading the book. So he had very good understanding of economics, which helped him to actually write the book. So no apologies for that. But about the issue of money, why the barter, the myth of barter that David tried to. So if we look at an economics textbook, they will start with the myth of barter. Even if the Bank of England will start with the myth of barter, that they wanted to, like the butcher and baker, they wanted to exchange goods with each other, and then they invented money. So this is the idea. So David unpicked that. Actually, it's not just, I think, the first book, in other parts, first chapter, other parts also, is that there is within the clause, when you know someone, like somebody is very close to you, at that time, actually, when you exchange goods, you don't really, you do it through debt. Like you give something to someone and that person will give you, return something after a long period of time. So some period of time. And so this is the David had this I think, that view. And also he was mentioning, but when we are having some exchanges between unknown people, like say two groups are meeting, like two tribes are meeting with each other at some point, then they will have some immediate exchanges. But other, when we know each other, then we don't need to have like something between us as a medium of exchange, because we know each other. So we know that if you give something to someone, we will get something back in return after some period of time. So this is how I think David unpicked the myth of barter, essentially. This is David's most important contribution, one of the most important contribution. If I come back to that, actually, in David mentioned about there is like Michael, somebody named Michael Innes, that he actually David referred to. Michael Innes wrote two papers about something called credit theory of money in 1913. That two papers, and Michael Innes was like also like unpicking like the Adam Smith's idea of the exchange. But it was not, for somehow we forgot that, and David actually managed to bring that again forward and known to like all of us, to the general audience. I'm not sure whether I managed to make it communicated, but this is the way David actually like destroyed the myth of barter. That was extraordinary.
Hello, Simona.
Hi, I was scrolling down text that I like very much, that is Against Economics, and it's a review of a book by Skidelsky. Skidelsky is a Keynesian economist of the Chamber of Lords, and but I wasn't able to find the quote about I was looking for. So I have to resume what I got from this text. Yes, economics in a way is a scam. It's what happens when you reduce the complexity of human relationships to numbers, to an abstraction. And Steven and I discussed a lot about property as abstraction, what the multiple meanings of abstraction, and how it affects many aspects of our life. Even manners. There's a very beautiful paper by David about manners and the hierarchy. Is the first chapter of possibilities. Manners are about abstraction, about separating people from the complexity of life, and so this is a very important point in the connection of ideas of David. I totally agree with Mehdi that the key point is the difference, the different kinds of exchanges you have between when you don't know people, when you know people, and also when a person is a potential enemy, or somewhere in that there is a very, I think it can be the second chapter actually, a description of how tribes that are not so good terms have exchanges, playing war as if it was a war, and in other cases, there is when strangers meet, there are offers that are not market, are not exactly exchanges between enemies, but between potential friends. It's an attempt to establish relationships of hospitality, for example. So yes, this complexity is what is stripped away by mathematics, and in the place of this complexity, you get violence that is, of course, stupidity.
I want to be mindful of the time, but I do see that there's 2 hands up. So happy to hear from Bruno and then Sid, and then we can wrap up if that's where everyone is. I do see Francesco. I will add you to the queue. Bruno, Sid, and then Francesco.
Yes, I wanted to briefly come to the question of what is a barter myth covering up. I think the essence is that in the barter myth, the 2 parties are equals. And I think a lot of economists' toolbox doesn't work if you don't start out from the assumption that both parties in the agreement are on equal terms and can walk away or trade if they want to. So I think that's false because people aren't equal. The relationships is never exactly equal. So I think the abstraction that the economist makes with the barter myth is saying, well, people in this situation are equal. So that's why I think that's what the barter myth is the base for. I think it's clearly debunked in the book. But also what I found interesting is, like Simona said, like the explanations of how it actually comes into work if 2 tribes, if we even can use that term actually, but well, if 2 tribes actually meet, that there is like this extreme tension between going towards violence and paying violence, but there's always this tension of like the one party can actually take the upper hand, so that the equal standing between the parties is like enforced in a weird way. So I think it's in that sense, like I think Graeber also writes somewhere that all theories are actually abstractions and lose different things, like in social sciences, that you can make an abstraction and it doesn't explain everything, but it explains something. So I think although the barter myth is a bad model because it never happened, but I think something that we can take away from that, if you look at the hypothetical situation that 2 tribes meet, there is some kind of enforced equilibrium between the 2, although it's like in an extreme situation. So I think I agree that economics isn't all knowing and it has many problems, but I think in some aspects, for example with the language aspect, that people say, well, you can't use other terms. Well, the problem is that you try to describe a phenomena with a certain term, and the issue is that, well, the phenomena goes on for a while and a while and a while, but I think if the basic assumption is correct or not is different from how you apply the system in the end. So the barter myths can just start to say, well, if you want a situation where people can trade, then you have to have an enforced equilibrium. Of course, in the real world, we know that you don't have these forced equilibrium. So I thought that was what I took away from the barter myth as why it's still taught, because, well, otherwise you can't teach any economics because you have to start out from this equilibrium between parties. So that's what my take is on why we invent, well, not we, but why economists invented the myth of the barter myth. I think that was what I wanted to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Sid?
Yeah, so Bruno, that's why interestingly enough, I put in the chat, I said there's the myth of the equilibrium, which is as much as the myth of barter. And I think just to add to what Simona and what you have said, Bruno, maybe we can close with a quote from another great man of the 20th century. And that was, it brings together also the element of violence, but in a particular flavor known as Stalinism. And that was George Orwell, when he said in Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. And I think that very nicely summed up the myth of equality, which is what we are kind of grappling with, trying to understand the myth of barter and equilibrium and all these myths. Equality is also a myth by definition, I would say. and Orwell attempted to shine light on that.
All right, I'm gonna hand it over to Francesco in just a moment. Before I do, if any of you want to contribute to the Google Doc that we've started, let me know. I'm gonna put my email in the chat. That's one way. Francesco, please.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, sorry for being a stranger up until now. 2 weeks ago, my connection was really bad. I'm a PhD candidate in culture and literary anthropology, and I'm working on internal colonialism in Europe, especially in the cases of Poland and Ireland, the turn of the 19th and 20th century. And so, because I do work with imperialism and colonial relations, of course, the concept of debt is crucial and is central to my work as well. And I wanted to go back for a second to the question Michael asked earlier about the myth of barter and why was it useful. And I want to connect it to the idea of violence underpinning that, which is of course evident within colonial relations, but the myth of barter can be thought, in my opinion, and Professor Graeber in his book mentions that quite often, even in the first 2 chapters, as functional to the kind of epistemic violence of imperialism. The myth of barter is very much connected with the myth of the savage, right? If we think about the kind of teleological view of history from barbarism to civilization and so on, which was underpinning the imperial ideology, barter has been constructing that be something pre-modern, something savage in a way, right? And this is quite clear when David Graeber mentions the fact that Morgan's description of the 6 nations of the Iroquois were the most common institutions were longhouses, right, where the most goods were stockpiled and allocated by Women's Council, and this notion was completely irrelevant to people traveling at that time. So I think that precisely this myth was very much functional to this idea of, you know, the white man's burden in a way. Yeah.
All right, this has been wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining in. We'll do this again 2 weeks from today. I see that Nika wants to add something, so I'll hand it over to Nika.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, everybody who came for the opening the last weekend, offline and online. We're sorry we had so many technical difficulties online. We hope it wasn't totally horrible, but we keep getting press with our opening. So I will put it soon all on the website and on the mailing list. So it looks like very exciting. And yes, I also please contribute to Steven's textbook on that. And that's maybe will be the first attempt to do the publication with David Graeber Institute that will kind of help us to develop something new and more.
All right, thanks. So yeah, next time it'll be chapters 3 and 4, and you know, similar format or whatever people are feeling like doing. This is a group that, you know, we're collectively making ourselves. So thank you, and have a great evening or morning, whatever your time code is, and see you next time. Thank you.